Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am currently in a hotel because I'm staying over in Berlin because I'm on the LEC analyst desk. Today, we're going to do a rundown of the LEC day and to follow that up with some predictions. So, I've been talking about the tier lists I've made and so forth, and of course, games that we see are going to change them. In my mind, we had a very interesting day. We had a lot of potential for upsets. Team Vitality today, of course, played against Astralis. I think something that Astralis did super, super well was that they kind of committed into a style. I was very happy to see the Twisted Fate back on Dayuor. I was happy to see the Kesante for Finn, and I think that they put a lot of emphasis on trying to create a circumstance where potentially Zeri and Yumi can carry. I think Kobe and Jonghoon are by far the best performers on Astralis, and I'm super happy that they kind of commit in one direction. They kind of slipped up on the objective control, which of course inherently is very difficult against a champion that is Maokai. Currently, it seems to me like Maokai is the go-to ban champion. I don't think there's anything that stands out as something that you can necessarily beat him with. Maybe there's a situation to kind of maybe play an Elise and then maybe play a game that is very fast and put Maokai on the back foot from the early game. But so far, Maokai is looking very broken in the LEC because a lot of the games are determined around Drakes. Then again, Maokai is finding a lot of success all across the board, so I don't think it's only specifically to the LEC. This time around, of course, you had Bo playing Maokai. I think Vitality showed a lot of composure. They just waited for their opportunities. And Astralis, even though they managed to gain a lead on Zeri, their item horizon spikes kind of didn't align with some of the objectives. Even though Zeri was ahead, moving into that third Drake, there was no Phantom Dancer finished on Zeri. Something to point out as well, if we are looking at Vitality and something to pay attention to coming into their future matchups, is that the Caitlyn Lux didn't look strong. They kind of lost the lane already level one with how poorly Kaiser pushed forward, and something that we were kind of uncertain of. The big question mark when it came to Kaiser is how well is he going to do on those ranged champions. He played the Nami with the Ezreal lane. Of course, that was weaker, but they managed to get 2v2 killed against Mad Lions with that lane. And here, Jonghoon and Kobe definitely laned a lot better than them and found a lot of good opportunities. All in all, I think in terms of the objective control, I think for sure Vitality looked good. I think Photon was an absolute machine. He kind of won the game with how he fought. A lot of flash ults on his Gnar definitely brought home the game. For me, Photon is the clear MVP of this match. And all in all, something to point out as well, I really didn't like the Caitlyn build. I think in cases where you have a Syndra itemizing Leandris and Void, I think it should kind of ring alarm bells in your mind that it's important to hit your good item spikes. I think this was a good example of a game where going Gale Force into cloaks and IE, where you kind of segue yourself by buying BF and pickaxe, and then potentially going LDR or rapid fire cannon, depending on the itemization of the enemy. I think Collector has lost too much value in the context of what the durability patch did for the game. The base armor of all your opponents is just way too high. All in all, I think Photon MVP, as mentioned before, I think Astralis, they are trying to find their identity, but they're going to begin to lag behind 0-4, especially if you look at their opposition, which is SK and BDS, that are starting to pick up steam. Next one, in terms of the matchups, a very big upset, but at the same time, Fnatic being really, really exposed in where their weaknesses are. I think this time around, I would say that Wunder and Humanoid also, with the draft in mind, right? It's like if there's ever a situation where Maokai and Sejuani is out, if you're not willing to create a draft that is strong against Wukong, I believe that Wukong most of the time gains too much value. Here, Varus was picked, and then they blind picked Kesante on 3, which was very surprising. I think in my mind, there probably what you want to look for is to match Jungle. Ezreal also together with Ashe. If you're not willing to pick the Heimerdinger when you have Ashe on your side to just create a circumstance where you have a very strong lane is also a potential weakness. Imagine a world where they were ready to do something like Ashe, Heimerdinger, and then Elise. Then this would make sense to do Wukong, and Wukong would potentially have a hard game. But instead, they go towards the Ezreal, they pick the Keisante, and they kind of invited the Olaf of Adam. I have to say that Adam is looking a lot, stronger as a player. I think that he is playing in a more complete manner. I think that he plays smarter around jungle, smarter around information, and the way he approaches fights has definitely improved. And I'm very happy to see that because this was something that we really, really tried to hammer home. Me, Bwipo, Shaves, with him when he was playing his rookie split in the LEC. So I'm glad to see that he has grown as a player. I think the best adjustments that BDS made was just how they approached fights and how they flanked, and they no longer kind of hung around Crowley's nutsack, and they found ways to create space for him in fights by pressuring the enemy from angles. And this is something that Shield did super well, something that Adams did super, super well, and BDS showcased the strength of their bottom side. Fnatic really, really exposed here in terms of the bottom meta. They really need to shake things up. This was my biggest concern when it came to Fnatic, and now after this game, I think that the alarm bells are ringing even harder in terms of this problem. They haven't shown to be playing. They don't play a lot of the meta bot lanes that are super, super strong, and where they don't have room to throw many bans. Like in this game, even they banned Lucian and Caitlyn, and then they threw a Sejuani ban on 3. Which in some cases makes sense, right? You don't want to give the enemy Sejuani and then potentially counterpick top, which is something that Adam is very comfortable with. I think Sejuani covers for some of the weaknesses that some of the champions that Adam likes to play. So they banned the Seju, and then the Heimerdinger came through, and it was something that was picked on 4. Ash support is decent against it, but if you pair it together with Ezreal, your lane phase is going to be super, super weak. So, Fnatic definitely need to shape things up. Humanoid also didn't look too great this game. He had a very rough start because, like the level 3 fight, he lost Flash and he died, and the wave was pushing towards him. Was a disaster. There was a situation where Wunder roamed into mid, and during this, Olaf just gets 4 platings, which, shot him through the roof in terms of the power. Wunder also got solo killed by Adam. This was a very, very rough game. They couldn't claw their way back, and BDS kept composure. They threw away a little bit of their Nash. But all in all, BDS looking very, very strong. This was a very, very, neat performance. But on the side of Fnatic, I rated them third. And after this game, they definitely are going to plummet down in terms of, what my opinion is of them, because I think that bot lane issue is way more alarming than I even thought, And all in all, I think, picking Kisaito 3, I think that you can't do. I didn't like it too much. And the big question is, can Fnatic find ways to get Rocks back on his comfort champions? I think this will be the way forward. And can they do that while also surviving lane phase? Because, pressure's on. The big thing as well is that when you're playing Azir and you're playing K'Sante, you can't ever let go or make mistakes in lane phase. If you fall behind with these champions, they feel very, very bad to play. Super, super bad to play. So in the context of what's going on bot, the expectations need to be way higher for the top side if they're going to, find some kind of momentum coming into the rest of the weekend, considering the struggles of the bot. So Fnatic looking really rough. BDS on the up and up. Very positive game. Made a lot of good adjustments based on what we've seen so far. And moving into the next batch, we had Team Heretics versus Koi. This was a very messy one. I think, way better showing from Jack Spectra and Mercer. The Lucian Nami looked better. I think that it looked very iffy when it comes to Team Heretics mid-game. They look very confused, and they're often just grouping 5 on the mid-wave. What the main adjustment they need to make as a team in order to find greater success is that when they contest through mid, is to not take it as literally. It's very important that they let Lucian Nami be on the mid-wave on their own and make sure that the rest of the team is playing in Fog of War, pressuring mid, and at the same time being a lot quicker to collapse on side. The issue that occurs macro-wise, if you're 5 people on top of the mid-wave, you'll never be on time to kill whoever is on side to basically, if the enemy Fiora is pushing the neutral wave while you're pushing the neutral wave on mid, she'll always kill it on time unless you're already collapsing on her in river while hovering through mid. So imagine you go through the ramp into river, into bottom side, while your Lucian Nami are taking the mid wave. They feel safe because they have the vision and information to do so, and they can always leverage forward, and Sivir Yumi can't really contest, and the enemy team has very low engage. You don't need to be 5-man showing on the mid wave, and this is where Team Heretics go wrong. But the main thing that is the issue for Koi is I think their draft lacked a clear identity. They had the Fiora, and Fiora could maybe, pressure enough to create something on side. But then eventually they were just faced with the truth that they needed to team fight with their composition. And at the same time, Koi has been really, really all over the place when it comes to finding engage angles and ideas of how to play together on the map. Koi, I think the bright spot is still Malrang and their bot lane's ability to lane. But in terms of team identity and how they work as a cohesive unit, it is very, very lacking. And this has been shown in every Koi game so far. So this is something that they have to figure out. We know that Koi started practicing super, super late. All in all, they have some serious thinking to do, because they are putting Shigenda on a lot of these carry champs we see as Jack's performances, the Fiora performances, and that comes with a lot of pressure. And I think that, sure, you're playing in a manner that potentially can pay off if you are willing to risk it. But at the same time, dropping a lot of games here in the beginning of the season, they're 2-2. Of course, they'll make top 8. But the crazy thing about the top 8 now is that if it continues and a lot of the teams that we expect to go higher drop games, the groups we're going to get in the best of 3 segment are going to be absolutely mental. There could be a situation where we have like a team like G2, and then we have Fnatic and let's say Koi on the same side of the bracket, which could be on paper, if we think about that at the beginning of the season, super, super nuts, and contenders could potentially knock each other out very early on in the competition. But I think that's the beauty of the format. Teams are exploring methods of how to approach it. It is very hard to find a lot of improvement in 3 days of practice, especially if you have to focus on the bullshit, right? If you have to focus on putting players in the right state of mind, if you have to focus on bickering and the attitudes and the mentality of the players, this is where you will have a really, really hard time moving forward. So it's very important to pay attention to those teams that seem to have the strong bond and find like very positive direction in terms of how they play. You can clearly see an idea in what is happening in the game. And even though Team Heretics are looking rough, I think that they're grouping up, and a lot of the mistakes they've done, their games have been a lot of bangers. I think that you can see what they're trying to achieve. And I think so far the same thing can be said for Mad Lions. I think the same thing can be said for Vitality, and then of course G2. Let's move on now to the fourth match, SK Gaming versus G2. I think in this one, G2, plain and simple, I think that they got outdrafted. I think that's first. They picked the Varus and the Graves into the elites, and then the enemy slammed Sivir Yumi. I think that Varus Lulu is a fine matchup for Sivir Yumi to play, and you have then shoehorned yourself way into a draft that is going to be completely about, how you are going to front to back. So basically, the whole draft is going to be about front to back the moment Elise, Sivir Yumi, Varus, Graves, Lulu get locked in. So this was kind of a unique side here because the gun was kind of put to the head of G2. Are they going to pick the Yumi? They didn't feel comfortable to be in a position where they can only pick part of their bot lane on 3 and invite the Sivir Yumi or the Zeri Yumi and then pick Draven again. Imagine a situation where they pick, let's say, jungle and then maybe mid, or jungle, maybe top, and then they see what the enemy is going to pick there on 2-3 and then potentially match on 3. Could be an angle, but at the same time, there's a lot of bot lanes that you can't answer with a single pick on 3. Like if the enemy goes Varus and let's say Varus Heimerdinger as an example, then finding an answer on one champ and the enemy having bans for 5 becomes super, super tricky. So the fact that SK left it up to G2 to decide which matchup they're going to go for definitely gave them an edge here. I think looking for Akali on 4 was very strange because, as I mentioned before, the moment Lulu and Yumi and Varus and Sivir is in the picture, everything is about front to back. And I think that Azir is a champion that definitely, breaks, into the pocket and the sphere of influence of champions like Sivir and also, of course, Varus. It's very hard for Sivir to ever trade auto attacks with an Azir. So looking Azir on 4, I think, would have been the better option, and then look for something that is just going to improve your front to back on 5. Instead, they went for Akali, playing Akali into Sivir Yumi, and the Sion and the Azir is going to be tricky, especially if your team composition is going to be Graves, Lulu, Varus. On paper, you're going to be much weaker and finding like lethal damage onto the enemy when they have an Azir ult and Yumi shield and Yumi heal, and of course, the Sivir spell shield. It is going to be tough to operate Akali in the fights. This is also a good example of where K'Sante is going to look a lot weaker. They slammed the Sion, which of course in lane phase is going to suffer against K'Sante, but K'Sante then needs to find ways to fight against the Sivir, Yumi, Azir, Sion when his team is going to be shorter range. So I think G2, plain and simple, got hard outdrafted here, and I think that SK, the standout player for me was just Markoon. Exekik and DOS had a fantastic game, when they played against Team Heretics. I think that they've already shown, their feet forward, which I think is super positive. But Markoon definitely was a standout player for me in this one because in the way he postured forward and the way he set up the bot gank and the bot dive, I think, this looked like a very confident player that was relaxed on stage. And he mentioned this on the analyst desk too. Very happy to see. I think Markoon definitely showed his potential in this one because week 1 was looking super, super rough for him. So props to SK for recognizing the win condition in the draft and adjusting to it and potentially picking a weaker champion like Sion just to make sure that, you have a tank into the Akali and of course the Graves, which is, neat. And then, of course, locking the Azir as well and taking that opportunity and then diving bot. This is the nature of best of 1, right? G2 still on paper is a better team than SK. But not patting away from bot, letting the enemy bot dive you, and then having a draft that is worse. This is definitely like a loss that can occur in a best of 1. And I think SK showed a lot of positive growth here. This really, really makes everything so much more exotic when you think of some of the teams that are struggling. Right now, SK and BDS have one more win than Fnatic and, of course, XL, which to think of is, crazy. It's crazy in itself. We might have a world where a team like XL or Fnatic will not make top 8. Of course, a lot can change with the weekends is long. We have a lot of matches, but it's fun to think about. This format is going to create some crazy storylines. Finally, we had the match between Mad Lions and XL, and it seems like XL didn't really watch the match that just occurred. They ran into, of course, the same trap. This time around, let me just pull up the draft. First and foremost, giving away Maokai. They picked the Maokai away naturally, and then they just challenged the enemy team on the front-to-back front again with just the Sivir Lulu lock-in, Zeri Yumi, and then, of course, you had the Wukong on 3. Wukong, I think Wukong is very strong, but in cases where Sejuani, Maokai, or Elise is in the game, Wukong loses a lot of value. It's very, very hard to play Wukong against the likes of Maokai because he spots every flank and every play that you want to do. Sure, you can W the Maokai ult, but I don't think that's enough. It's also that Wukong gets MR very late in his build. He just, plain and simple, needs to, itemize Device Sunderer, and honestly, Maokai just looks turbo broken, and Wukong is just a class below that. think when Wukong has to play against these magic damage dealers, he's definitely on the back foot almost the entire game. And in this one, you know, I think picking Wukong is definitely better than Seju because I think Wukong and Yumi just have, synergy. And I think this is what, of course, you know, Excel were going for. They just went for maximum Yumi synergy because this is something that has worked together with Viteo, Akali with Yumi, and then you have Gwen with Yumi. Just a lot of strong synergy here for Yumi. But I think that this is not something that works so well. The other side of the issue is that it's fine to go in this direction. If you think back of what T1 liked to do with Yumi, they made sure they had Yon, they played Silas and Akali. The main difference is that they managed to actually secure matchups that are good for them. Gwen is fine into Keisante, but you are going to be pushed in, right? Same thing, Azir. Akali is fine into Azir, but you're going to be pushed in. Bottom, Sivir, Lulu should be able to push against Zeri Yumi. And this obviously creates an element of advantage, and then you can find ways to deny the enemy the level 6 timer to do something active. There were some moments that looked hopeful for Excel. They did the bot dive and they had some fights that were positive. But I think that unless you're ahead of the curve, if the enemy just buys like one null magic mantle coming into a fight that is super, super important, you're going to be in trouble. But the issue is inherent, right? It's like you have a composition that is very polarizing in the way that it's played, and if the enemy is ahead, it's going to be rough. And the enemy has a stronger early game, and you saw that Mad Lions was securing very early drakes, and they managed to get Soul Point very early on in the game with the likes of Sivir, Lulu, Azir, Maokai. So already that on paper, you're super happy to have. Kesante was picked 4-5. Kesante is gorgeous here in contrast to what G2 had. Kesante is really, really good here because the enemy needs to enter into you. Keisante loves situations where the enemy needs to walk into him. He has a hard time, he has an easy time sticking to targets, but if he can't reach targets and stack his Q, this is where he sucks. And in this particular game, sure, he won't have an easy time itemizing, full armor like he likes to do with Iceborne Gauntlet, because there's a lot of magic damage on the enemy, but it just won't matter because the enemy is very short ranged and they're also very melee heavy. And this is a dream for Keisante. He has the Azir on his team, he has the Sivir on his team, and with that move speed and the enemy being provoked to engage into them is ideal. And I really, really like what Mad Lions is showing. Excel, they tried something different, and I think that's positive, but definitely not enough for me to get super excited about them. I think that Mad Lions was way better today. Some imprecisions, but all in all, I really liked what Mad Lions brought to the table. Which, of course, now brings us to tomorrow's or today's matchups, because I believe this is going to be released today. Astralis versus Team BDS. I think Team BDS looks to be the stronger team. I think that there is some room here for Astralis to maybe, target some of the bands, that are good towards Team BDS, maybe Roof, Darius, and Olaf from the picture, and make a more stable situation on top side. See what's hiding behind those cards for Adam. Adam has looked super dangerous so far. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he has the most solo kills so far, because he solo killed Odoamne twice, he solo killed today. He's been looking quite crazy on these champions that are going Flash Ghost, and Team BDS are figuring out ways to actually play the map without having that teleportation summoner on their top laner, which I think is, a really, really cool thing. I like that Team BDS are making things awkward for their opposition and definitely finding advantages through Adam. I like the fact that Adam, is more secure as a player and more consistent as a player. And I can see that there's been so much growth on the Adam side. So I'm happy about that. Team Vitality versus SK, even though SK, they showed a very good draft understanding. Vitality so far, I don't think they've really been caught with their pants down in regards to draft. Of course, the same thing I could have said about G2 before yesterday. I think that SK showed a good understanding of the early game today. And all in all, I think Team Vitality is favored. I think they've managed to stabilize a lot. And I think that this is a team with a lot of threats that you need to shut down. And I think that Vitality has shown a lot of dimension towards their play. SK slayed G2 today, and there's a chance that it's going to happen against G2 too. But I'm going to lean towards Team Vitality in this matchup naturally. Team Heretics versus G2. I think that G2 will learn a lot from today's game, and I don't think they're going to pigeonhole themselves into a same draft situation, I hope. And Team Heretics have a lot of mid-game and late-game things to work on. They are playing like a death ball, and I think that works against the teams that are less cohesive. But I think against a team like G2, they will find opportunities. They will make sure that they farm sides well. And, the main thing here about G2 is that they managed to fall behind, and this was the first game that they fell behind in. Team Heretics had a pretty decent early game today, and maybe if they can find momentum like that, putting G2 on the back foot seems to be, a positive thing. But I think that G2's draft really, really held them back today, and I think that made the game completely unplayable for them, even if, sometimes they try to squeeze some opportunities, right? Then we have Excel versus Fnatic. Crazy, crazy matchup. This is the battle of the biggest losers. I think that Excel hasn't shown me enough just yet to prove to me that they have enough teeth to really attack Fnatic's weaknesses. If Excel managed to, show a good bot lane performance, the crazy thing is that I feel like Excel's bot lane and Fnatic's bot lane has been super shaky so far, and I think if I compare pound for pound everywhere, I just have to lean towards Fnatic. But it has gotten so grim and dark that this is going to be truly a game of who is coming into the game with the best attitude and the best mental. And I think an additional layer of that is going to be the preparation. Excel, they threw something on the table today, and Fnatic also threw something on the table. I expect that both teams are going to make quite drastic adjustments coming into tomorrow. And once again, I reference just plain and simple the format. The format is crazy, and the teams are definitely getting tested. This is going to be a banger of a game. Finally, we have Koi versus Mad Lions. Mad Lions, way more cohesive as a team. I think that Koi has some draft issues to figure out. If they can find advantages through bot, if Malran can be crazy enough to create leads for Koi to simplify the game, then that's the way in. But I think Mad Lions have shown better fundamentals, better team play, and I think that Chasey has also shown some decent gameplay. And I think Shigenda is going to be challenged once again. I think Shigenda has gotten some advantages from Malrang, and sometimes he has struggled. And this is where Koi need to find easier ways to rally themselves within the game, because way too often in preparation for big fights and preparation for dragons, they are just positioned very, very wrong. I see sometimes comp is isolated, sometimes they're fighting 4v5. It feels like they're not really paying attention to each other, and there needs to be a way for them to connect and to really, really create ideas within the game that, are more streamlined, because it seems like they're playing spontaneous League of Legends rather than making plans for what's coming in the future. I still think that Koi, the biggest strength is Malrang. I think Malrang has played well so far. He's still very crazy and creative, and I think that creates some very positive lane states for Koi. And if they find ways to find that cohesiveness, then I think Koi can become dangerous again. But right now, I'm not a believer, so I believe that Mad Lions is going to win. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. It's been super exciting for me to be on the LEC broadcast. I feel so energetic. I feel so blessed to be able to work with so fantastic and, truly, truly talented individuals. I was on the desk today with Ender and Shocks, and I'm just having super, super much fun. I appreciate all of you. If you managed to get all the way till the end of the video, because I talk a lot, I would like you to be blessed. Bless you. Bless your face. If you sneeze during this video, bless you. I'll catch you guys on the next day of broadcast. I'll try to see if I can stream from the hotel, but I doubt it. All in all, I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.